I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it just feels like I'm swimming upstream all the time. And it helps to kind of take a couple steps back and look at the ground that I've covered just to get some perspective and acknowledge some things. And one of the things that I've been allowed to do since I've found a place to live that has given me a little more stability is that I've actually been able to unpack some boxes of books. And I know that might sound like it's no big deal to some people, but to me, it's been kind of a big deal because I have a pretty extensive library when it comes to astrology and herbalism and aromatherapy and like esoteric studies and basically just things that I've invested a lot of time in studying, and I've basically had those aspects of myself tucked away in boxes. And so I picked up a book that I haven't picked up in a long time, and it's this astrology book called Chiron. And it's called Chiron, Rainbow Bridge Between the Inner and Outer Planets. It's written by Barbara Hand Clow. Not sure if or Clow, I think it's Clow. But I've always been interested in Chiron because Chiron is like the bucket handle of my chart. And it's always proposed a little bit of a mystery to me. And it's funny because when I first started looking at a lot of other people's charts and studying astrology and working with, trying to understand the symbols more, I was kind of taken aback because I had just naively assumed that people had really similar placements in their charts and that everyone had their Chiron basically sitting opposite a grouping of planets in their chart. And then I learned that that's not true. And, I'm far enough along in my life that I can kind of look back at my life and see some things that have shaped my life. And more often than not, it's usually kind of forks in the road and things that I didn't plan for that have shaped my life more often than not. And those are things that have kind of been chaotic and big changes, when I was a kid, I figured out that I was allergic to synthetic fragrances, and so I started working with and studying aromatherapy, and I bought my first essential oils after like riding a regional bus like to another part of town, so I could buy my first little vials of essential oil at 14 years old, and later on, studied aromatherapy with a nurse practitioner and started channeling blends and channeled my chakra oils and started apprenticing with a teacher to learn the systems of tarot and astrology and just different kind of milestones that I've done in my life that I don't necessarily acknowledge right now because I'm busy swimming upstream. And so I sat down with this book the other day, and sometimes books can be like oracles if you just randomly open them up to a page. And the page that I just by chance opened up to this. A strongly aspected Chiron also is the pathway to healing the self. Often powerful squares and oppositions from Chiron to the inner planets are driving the native to a great inner healing. Squares and oppositions always create great energy in the dynamic, but how each person reacts is unique. Thus, Chiron opposite Venus will mean, and it goes on through quite a bit, which made a lot of sense to me because I have a stellium in Scorpio and I have Chiron at 7 degrees of Taurus, so it's basically sitting opposite my stellium in Scorpio. And then it says the planets in aspect to Chiron are the nerve endings into consciousness which access the fusion point. That is, Moon sextile Chiron creates an emotional nature which intuitively understands healing and desires attunement to the specific plane and time for alchemical fusion. The level this is working on must be examined in light of the whole chart, but regardless, what a powerful piece of news for the native. This native may be the nurse who automatically soothes the patient, the mother who calms her child. The sun opposite Chiron, which is me, I have my sun pretty much at opposite. It's like 3 degrees away from being opposite of Chiron. My part of fortune, which is opposite of Chiron. My Uranus, which is at 15 degrees. My Mercury at 18 degrees. My Venus at 21 degrees. And my Mars at 25 degrees. All in Scorpio, which is basically like the opposite position of Taurus, right? And Chiron is the handle. And then I have my Jupiter square Chiron, and I also have my moon square my Mars, and then I have Neptune on the other side. So I basically have like this big bucket with a bunch of planets on the bottom, Jupiter on one end, Neptune on the other, and Chiron is the handle of the bucket. And so it's like anytime it gets aspected or in transit or anything that's opposite of it or square it, or, you know, is in the position of Aquarius, which everything is right now, it's going to trigger those points in my life. And so it says the sun opposite Chiron creates a being who will not develop until they access healing energy. They will atrophy and feel sickened by their environment until they are given the chance to know their own power to heal. Now that Chiron is sighted, the issue goes to the critical level. People will find they cannot exist without the healing dimension in their lives. So I've been like all down because I've been like working my tail off on my day job for the last couple of years. Interestingly, if you look at how things line up, these aren't where the planets are in my chart. I can move them really quick though, just as an example. The way that everything has lined up, basically, you know, Jupiter for the last year has been moving through my 10th house, which has been expanding a lot of my workload. And now that Uranus is going through my 10th house, it's like inspiring me to have a lot of change, to say simply. But my natal chart, I'll just show you kind of what it looks like so you can understand what I'm talking about here in reflection, if you're even interested, you know. So this is roughly my natal chart here. So you basically see that Chiron is up here in Taurus, and it's basically like over on the opposite side. Oops, Uranus is down there too. It's on the opposite side of all of these planets. So it's in an opposition, and then it's also square to Jupiter. So whenever anything gets hit along any of these edges, and now that we have everything over currently in Aquarius, it's all getting aspected right now. And so there's a lot of pressure for me to like really look at what I'm doing with my life. And so I guess I'm bringing this all up because I've been looking at the tools that I have to deal with like the stress that I'm experiencing in my life. And one of those tools, of course, is my chakra oils that I made. And another tool has been to just reflect on some of the placements in my life. And I am bringing this up. I know this isn't like my typical Astro Tarot reading, but I think that this is kind of a cool aspect of astrology that I'm witnessing in my own study, which I just want to share with people if you're interested in the study of astrology and seeing how it shapes your life. So I basically just like took the time to like write down some big things in my life that have happened, like the things that I referenced earlier, you know, starting to study essential oils. When I was 22, my roommate, who I coincidentally met because my mom kicked me out of the house, right? When I was in 21, I moved in with this really eccentric Jewish lady who gave me a pendulum for my 22nd birthday. And I started choosing my classes in college with it. And then I eventually started channeling, using it as a tool. And that's what led me to develop my chakra oils. I channeled my chakra oils. And then when my nephew fell, he fell from a second story window right before he turned 5. And I channeled a blend for him and had some really interesting things come through. because whenever I channel a blend, I go back into all of my books and confirm why that oil was chosen. And there are relationships with essential oils and aromatics that have spiritual properties, emotional properties, physical properties, and mental properties that help our mind. Like, they help all these different aspects of our being, and they have a way of speaking to us in a way that words don't necessarily reach. And also, we have this olfactory memory that is very unique to each one of us. And so oils and scents and aromatics speak to us each differently based on our own library, our own historical memory of aromatics and what they inspire within us. And when he fell, it confirmed that just by way of what oils came through, because that's a story I can go into if you're interested, let me know. But so I started, there's all these markers by way of time and date that I started tracking the other day. And then I went into my Ephemeris, which, if you don't have one of these, they're really cool. They're basically books with charts of where the planets are at on any given day and any given year. And you can get an Ephemeris for, a 100-year period. Like, this is 1900 to 2000, which is helpful when you're looking at family date, birth dates and people who were born before 2000. And then I also have one from 2000 to 2050. And I basically have just looked at the dates, and like when my mom passed away, and, other big things that have happened, like when I started apprenticing to learn the tarot, when I started channeling blends, that time, like that I started channeling blends and also started apprenticing the tarot was the same time period. And so I've gone back into my ephemerises and looked at where planets were during those times and how they've aspected or transited my natal planets. And so that's been really freaking interesting, to just see how these trigger points show up in our development throughout our life. And then another thing, if you have an ephemeris and you're interested in seeing like our connections to our family members and people that we have close bonds with, or, strong relationships either against or, attraction to, you can look at their birth dates, and you may not know the time that they were born, so you might not know their rising sign per se, but if you know the day that they were born, the planets are going to be in the same place, with the exception of the moon, because it moves a lot in one day, like hour by hour, so it can shift from one sign to another sign within one day, but it only shifts signs like every 2 days, or roughly, 2.5 days. But you can see some coincidences, which to me is really freaking interesting, because just as an example, right, my nephew, who I referenced just a little while ago, he is a Taurus. His birthday, the day that he was born, places his sun at 7 degrees of Taurus. My Chiron is at retrograde 7 degrees Taurus. When he fell, I basically was like, I came out from behind my bushel, so to speak. Like, I had collected all this information. I had studied archangels. I had studied crystals. I was in my apprenticeship for the tarot. I was like a couple years into that. So I was in the process of drawing a deck. I'd worked with aromatherapy. I'd already started channeling blends. But I had done all of these things kind of behind the curtain, like the high priestess that is sitting on this chair in front of a curtain of pomegranates. Like, I was hidden. And when he fell, I pretty much just came out and was like, I don't care what you call me. You can call me a witch. You can call me earth child, you can call me whatever you want. I'm going to call on archangels for him. I'm going to bring, sprays to clean the room for him. I'm going to move crystals around for his room for him. And I'm going to pray for him. And a lot of people prayed for him, actually, people all over the country and probably even all over the world. Now that I think about it, they had a prayer circle for him, and which was very powerful. But the whole reason why I bring it up is because his son like triggered my Chiron. And it's interesting too, because his Mars, his mom, right, who has a 25-degree Taurus, is opposite my Mars, and I've always kind of butt heads with my sister. And his Mars is also at 24 degrees of Taurus, so it's just like a degree off of being right on top of his mom, and they kind of have like a love butt head relationship too. But it's interesting that you can see these alignments show up even in your family. Like you can, and I have seen things with my other brothers, like my younger brother, my older brother, as well as my mom, as well as my dad. And I'm really interested. I'm actually doing some historical research right now into some of my family members, just because I'd really like to know, you know, what their birth information was, so I can look that up, because it was only after I drew my second deck of cards that I learned that my granddad on my mom's side, my maternal granddad, was a tarot reader, and he read cards through like a traditional playing deck, and he was taught by his aunt who had raised him. And I had no idea about that all the time that I had been interested in tarot as a kid, when I like tucked it away in a drawer, to when I started apprenticing and learning it and really studying the system. I had no idea that my grandfather read cards, and he traveled around by train and read cards. So I'm really interested to see if I have any kind of astrological synchronicities with him. But astrology is super interesting, man. If you know your natal chart and you want to look at that information, I do suggest it, because it is quite interesting. Just like, you know, looking at the outer planets and how they were placed during pivotal times in history, whether the nation's history or, you know, global history and things like that, which honestly is what really made me do a deep dive into astrology in 2020, when I started making orbs, you know, to have three-dimensional star charts, because I wanted to see what was going on astrologically in like a 3D diagram. And so that's what inspired me to make my art. And so I guess I'm just sharing all of this because I feel like we have a lot more tools than we acknowledge and than we see when we have them all tucked away in boxes. And maybe you don't physically have them tucked away in boxes, but they're figuratively tucked away in boxes for safekeeping for whatever reason in your world. And I think it's just necessary that we start bringing our tools out and sharing them with others, and hopefully inspiring people to engage and interact in a different way. With that said, the whole reason, like what inspired me to do this, is because I really wanted to share my chakra oils and our energy system as a way to work through energies that we take on and learn more about ourselves. And I just felt like I needed to give some context, and also to acknowledge that I think, you know, we're all here for something, and if you're frustrated by something in your life, it's probably because you're being called to do something that's in more alignment with who you are. And that's kind of what I'm feeling these days. But I send a good wish to you. If you want to look at your chart, or if you're interested in learning more about astrology and kind of walking through the meanings of the planets and how they're showing up in your life and how they have historically shown up in your life, let me know. Reach out. If I get enough people interested, I'll probably do like a live Zoom meeting so people can share things that they've seen and acknowledged and shown up in their life, because it's definitely been interesting for me to see that. And I'll share, of course, too, if people are interested. I don't want to necessarily like bombard people with all that information. They don't want to know it. But yeah, I think it's interesting stuff. And hopefully you do too. And if you're interested in the chakra oils, of course, let me know. They come with, it's just a set of the 7 major chakra oils. They're all in 10 ml roll-on little bottles that I've labeled. And then it comes with a little booklet that I created originally, I think in like 2010. But I just kind of updated recently and added some meditations into that. So if you're interested in that, it is listed on my website. If you're interested in my tarot cards, of course, Delaney's Classic Tarot, they're also on my website. If you're interested in a reading by way of cards or in looking at your chart, I also offer those as well as a whole range of different products, skincare products and wellness products, because I make stuff, which as you can see, Chiron is the bucket handle of the chart for me. Being a healer is just part of my path. So I send you a lot of love and I hope you're well. See you soon. Bye. Mwah.